The meeting room felt too warm, the air stifling as Octavia slid the termination papers across the glass tabletop. She didn't bother looking up from her tablet, her manicured nails tapping impatiently against the screen. "Your director has persuaded me you're no longer essential. We're restructuring," she said, voice clipped and efficient. My stomach clenched. 17 years. I'd given 17 years to building this company's entire digital infrastructure from nothing, now reduced to a 60-minute exit window. Garrison leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. The slight upturn at the corner of his mouth told me everything I needed to know. He'd been gunning for me since the day he arrived 3 years ago. A woman who understood systems he couldn't comprehend was apparently too threatening to his fragile ego. Any questions? Octavia finally looked up, eyebrow arched, clearly annoyed that I hadn't already scurried away. I kept my voice steady. Just one. Who's handling the adaptive cycling protocol? Garrison straightened, stepping forward. We're implementing always-on architecture. Your little cycling system was inefficient. Modern systems don't need rest periods. He said it with such confidence, such crushing arrogance. I nodded, knowing exactly what would happen. I designed their server infrastructure using biomimetic principles, systems that required periods of reduced load, just like human muscles need recovery. It wasn't a defect. It was deliberate design. Our servers used 40% less energy and had 70% fewer failures than industry standard. I see. I stood, smoothing down my skirt. Then I wish you luck. Security will meet you at your desk, Octavia said, already turning her attention back to her tablet. As I walked out, Garrison muttered, "Should have stayed in your lane, Linnea." I cleared my desk methodically, the security guard shifting uncomfortably beside me. I took my plants, my coffee mug, the photos of my daughter. I deleted nothing from my computer. I changed no passwords. I altered no settings. I simply gathered my personal items and walked out, head high as coworkers averted their eyes. At home, I kicked off my heels and opened a bottle of wine. The cycling protocol should have initiated at midnight, shifting processing loads and allowing different server clusters to enter low-power states. But they'd overridden it. My phone lit up at 3:17 a.m., 6 missed calls, 12 text messages, all increasingly desperate, systems crashing, customer data inaccessible, everything's overheating, call us back. I poured another glass and waited, watching the minutes tick by. By 4:30 a.m., Garrison called himself. "What did you do?" he hissed. "Absolutely nothing. That's the problem. Fix this now or we'll sue you into oblivion." "For what? Designing systems that worked perfectly until you broke them?" I took a slow sip. Those servers were specifically calibrated for load cycling. Run them continuously at full capacity, and they'll burn themselves out. That's sabotage. That's thermodynamics. Check the maintenance logs. Everything was documented. You just never bothered to read them. 3 more hours passed. Octavia herself called next, her voice tense with barely controlled panic. "Name your price. We need you here now." Before we continue further, thank you for giving this story a chance. If you're enjoying this corporate revenge tale, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Your support helps bring more stories like this one. Now, let's get back to Linnea's situation. My name is Linnea Arden. I'm 43, divorced, with a daughter in college. I climbed the IT ladder when women in tech were still novelties to be tolerated rather than colleagues to be respected. I built infrastructure systems that mimicked natural biological patterns, systems that breathe, rest, and regenerate. My approach saved millions in energy costs and hardware replacements, but try explaining biomimetic computing to executives who think technology should run like tireless machines. I started at the company when it was still a startup operating from a converted warehouse. Back then, Terrence, the founder, recognized my potential. "You think differently," he'd said. "That's exactly what we need." Under his leadership, I thrived, eventually becoming the chief infrastructure architect. Everything changed when Terrence sold the company 3 years ago. The new ownership brought in Garrison as technology director, a man with impressive credentials, but traditional thinking. From day one, he questioned my methods. "Servers don't need rest periods," he'd argue during meetings. "That's outdated thinking. It's not about what servers need," I'd explain. "It's about system longevity and energy efficiency." He'd dismiss me with a wave. "We need reliability, not your pet theories." I'd bite my tongue, knowing the data supported me. Our servers experienced 70% fewer failures than industry standard. Our energy costs were 40% lower. The numbers spoke for themselves, but Garrison wasn't interested in listening. The breaking point came 6 months ago when Octavia replaced our previous CEO. Young, ambitious, and eager to make her mark, she aligned herself with Garrison immediately. They shared the same vision: aggressive growth, cutting-edge appearance, and modern methodologies. My practical, sustainable approach didn't fit their glossy presentation slides. I tried adapting. I created reports showing the long-term benefits of my system. I demonstrated how our infrastructure outperformed competitors. I even attempted to modernize certain aspects to appease them. Nothing worked. In meetings, Garrison would interrupt me mid-sentence. "Let's move on to solutions that scale," he'd say, effectively silencing me. Octavia would nod approvingly, her attention already elsewhere. 2 weeks before my termination, I overheard them in the break room. "She's resistance we don't need," Garrison said. "Her systems are black boxes only she understands." "Can we replace her?" Octavia asked. "I've been documenting everything. We can transition within a month." I walked away quietly, heart pounding. I knew then what was coming, but I didn't intervene. I didn't sabotage. I simply waited. Now, as I held my phone with Octavia begging for help, I felt no joy, only confirmation. "I want 30% of what this outage costs you, paid as a consulting fee," I said calmly. "That's extortion," she sputtered. "That's the market rate for emergency rescue from catastrophic failure. Ask any disaster recovery specialist." She paused. "Fine, get here now." I took my time arriving. The server room was chaos. Technicians frantically working while executives hovered. The hardware was literally smoking from being pushed beyond capacity. I addressed the room. "The system needs 12 hours of complete shutdown to cool and reset. There's no shortcut." Octavia paled. "That's millions in lost business." "Yes, and completely avoidable if you'd listened." Garrison stepped forward, face red. "This is ridiculous. We can force a reset and—" "Garrison, and permanently damage half your hardware," I cut in. "But please, go ahead, if you think you know better." The room fell silent. 12 hours, I repeated. "And I'll need complete autonomy to restore the systems properly." Octavia nodded tersely. "Do it." For the next 12 hours, I sat alone in the darkened server room, watching temperature gauges slowly drop. I used the time to document everything: the override commands Garrison had implemented, the warnings he'd ignored, the alerts that had been dismissed. I compiled it all, meticulously. When the time came to restart the systems, I did so gradually, implementing the proper cycling protocols. As servers came back online, relief spread throughout the company. By morning, everything was functioning normally. I was escorted to Octavia's office, where Garrison sat, tight-lipped and silent. "The systems are stable," I reported. "But there's something you should know." What I revealed next would change everything, not just for me, but for the entire company. The house of cards Garrison had built was about to come crashing down, and I had positioned myself perfectly to emerge from the rubble stronger than ever. But as I opened my mouth to continue, a notification pinged on Octavia's computer. Her face drained of color as she read it. "We have another problem," she whispered. Octavia turned her screen toward me. Customer complaints were flooding in, not just about the outage, but about corrupted data. Some transactions from the past week were showing errors. Others were missing entirely. "This wasn't part of the server overheating," she said accusingly. "No, it wasn't." I set down my coffee. "This is the cascade effect I warned about in my quarterly report last spring. When you force continuous processing without proper cycling, data integrity checkpoints get skipped." Garrison slammed his hand on the desk. "That's convenient, blaming your design flaws on us." "My design accounted for human error," I countered, "including the error of ignoring design specifications." The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Outside Octavia's glass office, employees hurried past, stealing glances. News of the catastrophe had spread through the company like wildfire. "How long to fix it?" Octavia asked, her composure cracking. "The data corruption? 3 days minimum. Some of it may be unrecoverable." Garrison stood up. "Unacceptable. I'll bring in an external team." "Who won't understand the architecture?" I interrupted. "They'll take twice as long and recover half as much." Octavia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. eyes widening. It's Hudson, the company's largest client. She took the call on speaker, voice suddenly warm. Hudson, good morning. Is it? The man's voice was ice cold. We've lost access to our entire inventory management system. Our warehouses are at a standstill. That's millions in shipping delays. What exactly is happening, Octavia? She looked at me pleadingly. I wrote a note. I can fix their system first. 4 hours. Hudson, I understand your frustration. We experienced a system-wide failure due to, she glanced at Garrison, an implementation error. We have our lead architect working on priority restoration. Your systems will be functional within 4 hours. 4 hours is still 4 hours too many. We have contractual guarantees of 99.9% uptime. I understand. We'll discuss appropriate compensation once systems are restored. After she hung up, Octavia's professional facade crumbled. Fix Hudson's systems first. Then we'll discuss your consulting fee. I smiled politely. My fee just increased to 40%. That's absurd, Garrison exploded. Data recovery is more complex than system restoration. Different skill set, higher premium. I gathered my things. I need access to my old workstation and credentials. Give her whatever she needs, Octavia told Garrison. Working through Hudson's data issues took exactly the 4 hours I'd promised. Their systems came online first, while the rest of the company remained in various states of disarray. By that evening, I'd stabilized about 30% of the affected systems. As midnight approached, I sat alone in the server room, surrounded by the hum of equipment. The door opened, and Garrison slipped in. I know what you're doing, he said quietly. Saving your career? I didn't look up from my screen. Playing the hero after sabotaging us. I swiveled my chair to face him. That's a serious accusation. You knew the cycling system would fail if we changed it. I documented that fact in 12 different reports. Reports nobody had time to read. Reports you were paid to read, Garrison. That was literally your job. He stepped closer. I've been going through the logs. There's an authentication signature showing you accessed the system remotely last night. My heart stuttered, but I kept my expression neutral. That's my automated monitoring alert. It pings the system daily to check status. Again, documented in the system specifications. Convenient. Thorough, I corrected. Unlike your understanding of the infrastructure. He leaned down, voice low. When this is over, you're done in this industry. I have connections you can't imagine. Threatening the person saving your company. Bold strategy. The next morning, I presented a recovery timeline to Octavia. 5 days to full restoration, with critical systems prioritized. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. The board is meeting this afternoon, she said. They want answers. I'm sure Garrison has plenty of those. Her eyes narrowed. This was your system. You bear responsibility too. My system worked perfectly for 7 years. It failed the moment someone decided they knew better than its architect. Later that day, I was summoned to the boardroom. 12 executives sat around the table, with Octavia and Garrison at one end. I was directed to a seat at the opposite end, physically positioned as the adversary. Ellis, the board chairman, spoke first. Miss Arden, we understand you designed the infrastructure that failed. I designed an infrastructure that operated flawlessly for 7 years, with 0 unplanned downtime. It failed when Director Lowry overrode the core operating principles despite documented warnings. Garrison interjected. The cycling protocol was outdated technology. Every major competitor uses always-on architecture. Every major competitor has triple our hardware replacement costs and double our energy consumption, I countered. Ellis raised his hand. The question before us is simple. How do we prevent this from happening again? You restore the original cycling protocols, I said. Or we modernize properly with redundant always-on systems, Garrison argued. A board member leaned forward. What would that cost? Around $7 million for hardware upgrades, plus increased operating costs of roughly $2 million annually, Garrison said confidently. And to restore Miss Arden's system, 0 additional cost. The hardware is designed for it. The room fell silent as they processed this. Ellis cleared his throat. Miss Arden, would you step outside while we discuss? In the hallway, I paced, running calculations in my head. The outage had already cost them at least $10 million in lost business and client compensation. My 40% fee would be significant. After 20 minutes, I was called back in. We've made a decision, Ellis announced. We'll be restoring your cycling protocol for now, but transitioning to a hybrid system over the next 6 months. We'd like to offer you a 3-month contract to oversee the transition. I hadn't expected that. My consulting rate is triple your previous salary, plus the fee already agreed upon for the emergency response. Ellis slid a contract across the table. We value expertise, Miss Arden, even if some failed to recognize it. Garrison's face was a storm cloud. Octavia looked resigned. I'll need to review the terms, I said, taking the contract. Of course. In the meantime, please continue the recovery efforts. Over the next 3 days, I worked around the clock. Systems came back online, one by one. Data was recovered where possible. The company limped back to operation. On the 4th day, I found Garrison in my old office, going through my archived files. Looking for something? I asked from the doorway. He jumped slightly. Research for the transition plan. Those files are outside the scope of your access permissions. I'm the technology director. Nothing is outside my scope. I stepped closer. You know what I think, Garrison? I think you're desperate to find evidence that I sabotaged the system. Because if you don't, everyone will know this disaster lands squarely on your shoulders. His eyes narrowed. The board may be temporarily impressed by your recovery efforts, but they see the bigger picture. Your system was a house of cards. My system was brilliant, and you know it. That's what really bothers you. That a woman created something you couldn't understand, much less improve upon. You're living in a fantasy world. He gathered his tablet. Enjoy your temporary victory. This company will be implementing my vision, not yours. As he brushed past me, I caught his arm. Before this is over, everyone will know exactly who you are. That night, as I reviewed the contract offered by the board, I noticed something peculiar. A clause regarding intellectual property that hadn't been in my original employment agreement. I called Mira, my attorney. They're trying to claim ownership of your biomimetic computing methodology, she confirmed after reviewing the document. Not just the implementation you created for them, but the entire concept. That's why they want me back. They're afraid I'll take it elsewhere. Precisely. And this transition plan they're proposing? It looks like they want you to document everything. Then they'll likely terminate you again once they have what they need. I thought about Garrison's smug face, about Octavia's cold dismissal after 17 years of service, about the board's sudden interest in my expertise, now that they needed it. What if I counteroffer? I asked. With what terms? I smiled, knowing exactly what I wanted. Terms they won't be able to refuse, but will regret accepting. The next morning, I returned to the office with my revised contract and a flash drive containing something I'd discovered during the recovery process. Something that would change everything. As I waited in the lobby for my meeting with Ellis, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email now. We need to talk before you meet the board. I opened my email to find a message from Octavia's personal account, not her company one. The subject line read, "What Garrison didn't tell you." The attachment was a series of emails between Garrison and someone named Pierce at a competing company. My heart raced as I began to read, realizing I had underestimated just how deep this conspiracy went and how perfectly positioned I now was to exploit it. The emails unveiled a shocking conspiracy. For 6 months, Garrison had been feeding information to Pierce, the CTO of our largest competitor. Not just company gossip, detailed infrastructure vulnerabilities, client dissatisfaction metrics, and strategic roadmaps. The most damning email was sent just 2 days before my termination. Once Linnea is removed, we proceed with Phase 2. The system will fail within 72 hours of disabling her cycling protocol. When clients panic, your team can offer emergency migration services. Split the commissions 70/30 as discussed. My hands trembled as I scrolled through more messages. This wasn't just corporate sabotage. It was calculated destruction of something I'd spent nearly 2 decades building. I quickly forwarded the emails to my personal account and my attorney. Then I texted Octavia, "Meeting in 15 minutes. Your office." When I arrived, Octavia was pacing, her usual confidence replaced with jittery anxiety. "I only found those emails this morning," she said immediately. "I was reviewing Garrison's communications after the board raised questions about his implementation decision. And I was blindsided. I had no idea he was working with Pierce. I studied her face for signs of deception. You fired me on his recommendation, Because he showed me reports indicating your system was inefficient. Reports that apparently were manipulated. She slumped into her chair. The board is going to crucify me. The board doesn't know yet? She shook her head. Just me. I wanted to speak with you first. I considered my options. The flash drive in my pocket contained not just Garrison's treachery, but something equally valuable. Proof that my biomimetic computing methodology had applications far beyond what the company had implemented. During the recovery, I discovered logs showing how my adaptive systems had automatically prevented 3 major cyber attacks last year alone, a feature I'd built in but never documented. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. We're going to meet with the board together. You'll present what you found about Garrison, and I'll present my contract revisions. They'll fire me, Octavia whispered. Possibly. That depends on how you handle the next hour. The boardroom was tense when we arrived. Ellis looked surprised to see Octavia accompanying me. Before we discuss my contract, I began. Miss Winters has information critical to the company's security. Octavia connected her laptop to the projector with shaking hands. As the emails appeared on screen, gasps and mutters filled the room. Ellis's face darkened with every slide. Where is Garrison now? He demanded. Security is escorting him from the building, Octavia replied, voice steadier than I expected. I've also initiated emergency protocols to lock down all systems he had access to and contacted our legal team about pressing charges. Ellis turned to me. Did you know about this? I discovered evidence of tampering during recovery, but Miss Winters identified the external connection. The half-truth came easily. Let Octavia have that small win. I had bigger targets. This is outrageous, one board member exclaimed. We could be facing massive liability if clients learn their data was deliberately compromised, not to mention the competitive intelligence that's been leaked, added another. I cleared my throat. There's more. I connected my flash drive. While recovering systems, I discovered that my adaptive infrastructure actually prevented 3 major cyber attacks last year through its self-healing protocols. Attacks that were never reported because the system handled them automatically. I displayed the security logs, the timestamps, the blocked intrusion attempts. These security features weren't in any documentation, Ellis noted. They were proprietary innovations I was still refining. Innovations that are part of my broader biomimetic computing methodology, which brings me to my contract revisions. I distributed copies of my counteroffer. The room fell silent as they read. This is unprecedented, Ellis finally said. My terms were clear. 1. Full ownership of my biomimetic computing, intellectual property, with the company receiving a perpetual but non-exclusive license. 2. Creation of a new Chief Innovation Officer position, reporting directly to the board, not to Octavia. 3. 15% royalty on all implementations of my methodology, both existing and future. 4. Public recognition as the creator of the technology in all company materials. 5. A seat on the board of directors. You're leveraging our crisis for personal gain, one member accused. I'm establishing fair value for innovations that saved this company from complete collapse. Twice. Once from external attacks you never knew about, and once from internal sabotage. I leaned forward. My technology is worth billions. You're getting it at a discount. Ellis studied me. And if we refuse, then I walk away with my IP, start my own company, and you lose not only your infrastructure, but your competitive advantage in the market. The negotiations lasted 3 hours. Voices were raised, threats made, lawyers consulted. By afternoon, we had a deal. Not everything I asked for, but enough. I would have my C-suite position, my IP ownership, with favorable licensing terms, and my board seat. Octavia survived, barely, demoted to regional operations. While the board searched for her replacement, she accepted her diminished role with surprising grace. As we left the boardroom, she pulled me aside. You could have destroyed me. That was never my goal. What was your goal? I smiled. Recognition, respect, the chance to build something lasting. You've certainly achieved that, she hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have looked deeper before acting on Garrison's recommendations. Yes, you should have. I offered no absolution. Some bridges remain burned. The next month transformed everything. Garrison faced criminal charges for corporate espionage. Several clients who had been approached by Pierce's company during our outage came forward with their stories, strengthening the case against him. I assembled a team of brilliant engineers who understood my vision. We expanded the biomimetic computing platform, applying its principles to new domains. The stock price soared when we announced partnerships with 3 Fortune 100 companies eager to implement our energy-efficient, self-healing infrastructure. 6 months later, I stood on stage at the National Technology Summit, accepting the Innovation Impact Award. The applause was thunderous as I approached the microphone. Thank you. This recognition means a great deal, particularly because it acknowledges something I've believed throughout my career, that the natural world offers profound lessons for technological design. Systems that breathe, rest, and regenerate aren't inefficient. They're sustainable. They're resilient. They're the future. From the audience, I spotted Ellis and the board members, beaming proudly, as if they'd supported me all along. Seated further back was Octavia, her expression unreadable. I'd like to share an insight that guided me through difficult times. I continued. Innovation doesn't fear disruption. It anticipates it. The systems I design expect failure and adapt to it, growing stronger in response. What I didn't say was how perfectly that principle had applied to my career. When they tried to discard me, they created the conditions for my greatest triumph. Garrison's betrayal, Octavia's poor judgment, the board's short-sightedness, all became leverage in my ascension. The sweet irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to render me obsolete, they had made themselves obsolete instead. Now they worked for me, implementing my vision, executing my strategy. As I concluded my speech to resounding applause, a message appeared on my phone, an alert from the adaptive system monitoring our main competitor's public-facing web services. They were experiencing cascading failures across their network, the same competitor that had conspired with Garrison to poach our clients. I smiled, slipping the phone back into my pocket. Sometimes karma needs no assistance. Sometimes the systems we build deliver justice all on their own. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate revenge and justice served cold, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone underestimated who later proved their true value? Your engagement helps bring more stories like Linnea's to light, where intelligence and patience triumph over corporate politics and betrayal. Until next time, remember that sometimes being declared obsolete just means they haven't caught up to where you already are.